of the additional sequestration. And then there's reduced amenity mowing, 18%, tree planting, 13%, and then a very small percentage from reed bed creation. So that's where the 210 tonnes of additional sequestration target is coming from. So this is the CAF's dashboard. The link is in the presentation, which I'll share around via Zoe later. If you went to own operations and clicked on carbon removals, this is the table that you will have visibility to. On the right-hand side, there's a selection drop-down box where you can look at different aspects from the different perspectives. But just to summarize again, so for the different sites where the sequestration is happening, is summarized along the bottom. So Copthall is our primary source of additional sequestration, then Patmores, and so on it goes. You'll notice at Wanstead Flats there's a 0. We'll touch on that a little bit later. And then you've got Hampstead Heath, West Ham Park, Colston Common, Queen's Park, and Burnham Beeches. So Copthall and Patmores, that's where our large sequestration additionality comes from. Moving on to reduced amenity mowing, I'll start on the right-hand side. West Ham Park, we've overachieved our targets there for reducing amenity mowing areas. Queen's Park, a little bit lower. However, there's recently a site visit indicated that they will overachieve their target as well, which is great. Hampstead Heath, about half of its target. But if you add all 3 North London open spaces together, it's really achieving the reduced amenity mowing target anyway. Wanstead Flats is the biggest area where we're missing our target, and that's primarily due to football and the requirements for space to continue the very active football events on site there. We have discussed this in quite detail in various board meetings, but happy to touch on that later if necessary. Then going on to woodland expansion, Copthall, we will be planting about 4 hectares of new woodland towards the end of next year. That's along the M25. Hampstead Heath, there's a challenge of increasing that. The amount of woodland already naturally established versus other habitats is making it really tricky to expand on that one. West Ham Park, we have done a site visit. There will be some tree planting very soon. However, again, there's really challenging to find new areas to plant trees. It's just the competition with amenity use that makes it really difficult. Hedgerow creation, same goes again for West Ham Park. There's only so much we can expand on that, but there are plans to plant some, and the box on the left-hand side is indicative of what we may be able to achieve. Copthall, we've overachieved there, so that's great. And Queen's Park is a relatively small amount. There will be some hedge planting, but not a lot. Just to summarize the overall expectations, so our target on the left-hand side in blue is 210 tonnes. Where we are at the moment, we've realised about 75% of that. Where could we be? Well, anywhere between 85 and 90% achievement by March 2027 of that 210 tonnes. And that's because of the various reasons I've given before, primarily Wanstead Flats. And just to finish off, so increasing biodiversity, there's a lot of biological monitoring taking place. I'd like to share more on that in the future. We've got to bear in mind that ecological processes are relatively slow. So for those changes to be visible, detectable using the data takes time. But we are continuing that, and we will share more on that in future meetings. And then in the middle, protecting existing sequestration. We've touched on these initiatives in various meetings. Deer management, squirrel surveys, which I'll expand on more on in the summer, because we're doing new surveys in the spring. Tree protection, I've mentioned before, leaky dams, we know about, and wildfire preparedness. Happy to touch on any of these initiatives in future meetings if there's any specific requests. And just to finish off, this is a photo taken yesterday of the hedgerow planting at Copthall. That's going really well, and will continue during January and February. Thank you.
Well, I had the great joy of explaining leaky dams with Elizabeth Corran to some of our colleagues last week, which was probably the real trial of how much we've learned. But thank you for that, Heinz. And I mean, all I'll say, I think on all of those, the slides that were presented before, just on the work that's happened, what they look like, are so helpful. Because I think for many, they either have a slightly skewed view or maybe a sort of a view that's not really based in anything sort of experiential in terms of how that's done and where it goes. But I think these are really helpful in terms of being able to build that understanding, but also broader support, not just with colleagues, but other stakeholders. So thank you for that update. John. And then Caroline.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. That's an excellent progress report, and excellent progress, I should say. I have one thing which relates to Hampstead Heath. So south of the Heath, we have a big development called Kentish Town West. And for that, the developer is going to plant trees in, I think it's in Wiltshire. But we think there's scope for, we've been talking to developers, to bring that round to do more on the Heath. And I think there is scope. We're looking at the area at the south of the Heath around the Lido, which doesn't have so much, let's call wild trees and so on. So we'd quite like to come and talk to you, and of course our superintendent and so on, about that at some stage.
Heinz, can I just, I've just seen William has shot his, yes, exactly. William, do you want to come in at this point as well? I think that might be related.
No, I think it just makes sense to take it together, because it's certainly true that there is this tension, and will continue to be, between what's being sought to achieve with this programme and the actual amenity use of these spaces. The area around the Lido is heavily intended to be used for sport and informal recreation, but there are one or two spaces that could do with a little improvement. But it is certainly something that's in mind. It's just my main question, I suppose, sort of leading on from that, is that we knew about the problems of the tension with amenity use, and the fact that our open spaces in the dense urban areas are so important for the people, and therefore there's always going to be a tension. And I was just wondering, the question really is how much the targets really should have taken that into account in the first place, or should we be looking back at the targets and saying, well, now we know what we know, are they being too ambitious? So that's the first question. The second one was, are we able to take any credit for maintaining what there is, so to speak, keeping the ancient woodlands healthy, or is that just simply not in the metric? So the problem is really with the metric, not with the work we're doing. So sorry, to take 2 points, but it does link back to the point that's just been made about the capability to improve things, for instance, on Hampstead Heath. Thanks.
So should we take those in reverse, just starting with John's point on the specific of the West Kentish Town development?
Absolutely, we'd be very happy to have a conversation. We've got the resources in terms of funding, we've got the expertise, we've got the suppliers, we're ready to go. We're very happy to plant trees. It's just finding the right place and situation for them.
Great. Well, I'll let that one be taken away as an action. And then on William's points, I mean, I suspect, Heinz, your answer will be very much like mine on targets, and whether or not they were too ambitious or not. But I suppose it's an interesting point also around the metrics we've used and how they were set. I mean, I know this is something that we are revising over the timeline. Yes. As we head to 2029.
So we had a consultant in, land use consultants, and they came up with various opportunities, and we shared those with open space teams, had conversations. That was probably about 2 years ago, and targets were set based on those proposals and those conversations. And when reality set in, I think we realized, well, this is not going to be possible. So for instance, at Wanstead Flats, we were hoping to convert about 13.6 hectares of grassland that's currently used for football into reduced amenity mowing. So in other words, meadows. And because of the pressures and how well it's going with the recreational use, the site managers just didn't feel comfortable with doing that conversion. So that's where we had to stop.
Got it. Caroline.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It does link to the previous two questions in some ways, because what we've been stressing with Heinz and the Carbon Action team in Epping Forest is the need to set now the carbon action within the nature resilience, particular water resilience and biodiversity programs, so that it's not seen as separate or something that's been done to each of the open spaces. And I think for each of the charities, excuse me, it's the moving forward with this that is very important. But I think you've already said, Heinz, I think for each of the charity teams to have their own discussion with you in terms of the best way to set the carbon action within the priorities, your own open spaces, because at Hampstead Heath it's different to us in Epping Forest. It's really the community access, the amenities, the leisure. It's a very different focus. And the second thing was that the city's carbon action team are releasing a series of webinars in January and February, 4 webinars on water resilience. So could everybody, Heinz, on this committee as well, be sent those links so that people can sign up? You have to sign up for each one individually, but they will then be recorded and you can watch them as you see fit. But they're going to be really excellent in terms of providing background.
Thank you, Caroline. I wholeheartedly support the point. I think that the narrative is a critical one. That resilience, future biodiversity and sustainability needs to be seen within the context of carbon capture, not as something that we have to choose between the two and allow tension to develop. Absolutely right. Catherine.
How much does the metrics incorporate the maintenance, the ongoing maintenance? So, for example, if you're planting trees for woodland or for a hedgerow, you need to maintain the ground clear and establish those plants, and that's a high cost to start with, and then the cost reduces over time. I wonder how much that's included.
So may I respond?
Yes, please.
Yes, it's a very good question, and I don't think it's been fully considered. But in some cases where we are able to apply interventions now, we've got a year left of the project, and we can utilize the budget from the project to facilitate and pay for the maintenance. But long term, yes, there is a gap. In the recent work we've done with the Green Gauge consultancy, looking at the next phase, we've incorporated costs that we would need to go on, to continue maintaining the existing interventions that we've applied. We've done some costing on some of the interventions, and really it's only the first year where there is a cost, but it's not that significant. But it's a good question. Yes, we need to look long term, and we have, as part of the next phase review with Green Gauge Consulting, to build in costs. But that's all provided that we do get the next phase and get the funding to deliver more plus maintain.
Very interesting. Thank you, Catherine. Do I see another hand? Yes, Ben. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you, Chairman. On revenue costs, it's actually coming to the Policy and Resources Away Day in January, because it is a massive challenge that we have as an organisation. And indeed, whether or not we continue to run at the same rate on existing targets or not. So there will be something, I think, that's slightly clearer. I know the Chamberlain is trying to work up those numbers at the moment, so I'm sure she'll tap into you, Heinz. But the questions I had one was on wildfire. I know we're focused on wildfire resilience, but has there actually been any measurement of the impact of wildfires, because they are becoming an annual event now, and what impact it may have on carbon sequestration or other things that we are measuring against? The second was just actually on the Cotswold project. I actually had a message from the contractor to say what a joy it was to work with the corporation on that. They really enjoyed it and were sharing some of the information on it. So it's good to hear that there is a great relationship there, and that clearly the city has done a good job in procuring that activity. Thank you, Chair.
Brilliant. Thank you for that feedback. Excellent.
To respond to,
yes, to
the wildfires and measuring the impact, I think at the beginning we still had a far way to go, but we are making progress. For example, one of the officers at Epping Forest is the conservation manager, has developed ArcGIS-based Survey 123 form that can be loaded onto a phone or a tablet. So this is very, very new, but the plan and intention with that is that the officer who's overseeing the wildfire would walk around actually measure the boundary of the wildfire, and we are hoping from that we can calculate and estimate the carbon and the loss that's occurred from there. But yeah, we are making progress in being better at recording what's happened, where it's happened, how much, whereas before it was very foundational, basic information we were recording.
Just explain to me how that works, Heinz, when you say walk around the boundaries.
So if you,
after the fire's burnt out.
yes, so if you've got a phone that's got a GPS built in,
And you go,
and it just follows you.
walk around.
You build, you're basically building a polygon, which is a GIS shapefile, and that can then calculate the area.
Oh, okay, I'm with you. So it's just calculating the surface area.
And then if you know what the vegetation type is, from that you can extrapolate.
Yeah, so there's the
emissions released.
Yes, go for it, Ben.
Let's come back on that. The two things on that. I think William's point on the existing benefits outside of the sort of value add from CAS was measured, and I don't know, Emily, if we have any plans of going back and measuring that again. More concern around whether or not it's reducing rather than increasing within the sort of wider context, not just the climate action strategy value add stuff, or some of the open spaces.
I think I'll let Heinz answer the second bit of your question, but in terms of the first bit, yes, there is a plan to we aspire to regularly kind of measuring this at agreed intervals, but that is obviously dependent on what is agreed in terms of future funding for the climate action strategy programme. So I think TBC, but it's definitely something we want and really should be doing. And Heinz, can I go to you for the second part of the question, please?
Not sure there was a second bit for Heinz. He's looking pleased, but there was a second part just on the revenue point, which is, should we be making sure we reflect it in the risk register at this stage? Because essentially we're saying we have an increased revenue cost now from climate action strategy and no funding arrangement.
That is something that's under discussion at the moment, and I will pick it up with the superintendents and with Joe Hill as well. Thank you.
Excellent. No more questions or comments. Well, thank you again, Heinz. Item 7, we now move into open spaces. We've got the Natural Environment Operational Finance Progress Report, Q2 for 25-26. Clem, I think we're all very happy to see numbers returning to much healthier space at year end, the reductions in the overspend in particular. But I wonder if you want to give us the headlines of the report before we take questions.
Well, yes, I mean, agenda item 7 is for information and provides an update on various financial matters for the Natural Environment Vision and City Gardens for the 25-26 financial year to the end of September 2025. This includes an update on the revenue budget for 2025-26 to the end of September, an update on capital projects for the division, outstanding debt arrears, and details of the reserve funds held for the various natural environment charities. And we're happy to answer any questions on the report.
Thank you, Clem. Any questions? Ben?
Mine was a super high level one, which was, I think we probably all accept that the level of financial acumen across officers is different across the Natural Environment Division. But do we have anywhere that identifies budget holders and their responsibilities somewhere in their job specification or something similar to explain who is accountable for that, and therefore what training is aligned to them to make sure they fully understand how the budget works and how it should be managed?
We don't have something like that, but I think that would be very helpful. I think there's still quite a grey area, and certainly in my mind, about kind of delegated levels of responsibility for budget management and other delegated responsibilities as well. So I believe that town clerks are doing some work on revising and updating the delegated the list of delegations to officers, but I know they're under-resourced and understaffed at the moment, so that's something I'll pick up with town clerks as well, because obviously they're crucial to that. But yes, completely agree, and that would be very helpful, so we'll take that away as an action.
Great. I think the delegated authority will only ever sit at the ED or D level, so it's probably what happens underneath that within your own teams.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben. Very good point. Tony.
Chair, it's kind of a follow-on about revenue implications of capital expenditure, and I understand that any capital expenditure is raised under the risk register, but it may be Joe who can answer this, about how much that is incorporated into the asset management work that's going on, because I noticed on page 35 about installation of non-turf pitches. It's just one small example that can have huge revenue implications, and I just wondered if that was woven into the asset management work that she's so splendidly doing.
Joe. Oh, Joe.
I think that's this Joe, although my colleague also deals with risk and those elements. Yes, there's all manner of different things, and risk is interwoven through each of the different various different themes. There's risk registers across all of the various different projects. Yeah, it's quite a wide-ranging question to try and answer, but yeah, risk of all of these different things is taken into account. If you want to, yeah, please. So
sorry, just perhaps to help you answer the question. I'm not so interested about the risk. It's about before you commit the corporation commits itself to capital expenditure, is it really taking account of what the future commitments will be? Because that's the killer. And as you move to this new funding regime, it's fundamental. And I know you're doing a lot on asset management, and I wondered if it was being picked up on there.
So you're saying about long-term maintenance costs and other obligations for replacements and various other things when we're doing capital. For the moment, yes, I would say absolutely yes, it is, and that's part of the business case. But you can only look at so far ahead, so there's always going to be unknowns. But long-term maintenance of capital investment is always considered as part of that project.
Just to add, Tony, I think your point is absolutely right, and it's one that I know Caroline, James and I have all raised as well, because actually often the organisation just looks at built asset maintenance, and our concern is, but we have hundreds of signs, we have the pitches, we have the pergola, we have all these other bits and pieces that actually, we talk about ponds, if we drained and relined a pond, that's 10 to 12 million pounds all of a sudden, so the huge sums of money that we need to build in as part of the process. So I think there is an awareness to it. I don't think they're there yet, but it is absolutely, that's why this is being taken in phases. Local risk first, then we'll move on to the sort of allocated cost model to come.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Clem. Right, that takes us to item 8, which is senior officer recruitment. This is a report none of us took any pleasure in reading. The thought of losing Andrew is yet to be fully accepted by this committee, I shall say, but we have no choice, Andrew. But on that basis, I know this has been quite a fast-moving process, Emily, notably the balance between sort of the interim process and then moving to a permanent appointment. I wonder maybe if you just give us an update as to where we are today.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so we did run a recruitment exercise for an internal officer as an acting up opportunity to do the role for a fixed term, say between 6 and 9 months, to give us the time to recruit a permanent replacement. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful in finding someone suitable to do that as an interim role. So obviously sort of discussed with the chair and with other members of my leadership team and with Katie, and we are planning to therefore bring forward the recruitment of a permanent replacement. So in the paper that you've seen, we had proposed to start that recruitment process next March, but actually we're proposing bringing that forward to now. So we're working on a revised and updated advert and job description at the moment, and just in the process of finalising that. We aim to get the job advert live before the 18th of December, because the corporation is changing over to the new SAP system, and if we don't get it live before then, we lose that window of opportunity until late in January, and really As you're aware, there's a huge amount going on at the moment. We're all under a lot of pressure. There's a lot of kind of high risk, high profile issues. Obviously, you know, we've heard, and we'll hear a bit more about the grant funding model, but there's a lot of other work that's going on, including the ponds consultation, and also the reletting of the cafes at Hampstead Heath, which nowhere else, and I'm sure in the UK would that actually reach national media, but here it does. So we really want to bring that forward, and what I did yesterday was meet with the senior leadership team to go through kind of Andrew's key current priorities and to work out who can cover what in the kind of interim period. So we have worked out a cover plan. Inevitably, some things will have to be kind of paused or delayed for a bit, because we just don't have the capacity until we have someone in place. So things that are important but not urgent, such as the stakeholder mapping and engagement, I think we'll just have to realistically postpone those. But what I'll do is circulate a kind of list to the chair and deputy chair following this meeting of what we're proposing in terms of the interim arrangements. In terms of the recruitment of a permanent replacement, we're obviously engaging with HR, we're engaging with you, James, and with other committee chairs as well, and we have got a plan in place in terms of a timetable and a schedule for that, and it follows the usual member involved recruitment process. We're also submitting we've tweaked the job description slightly following discussions with members and with senior officers to really kind of focus on the business planning, kind of business management, policies and procedures, you know, kind of the governance and kind of management side of things, particularly, you know, improving our business planning, making sure that we get, you know, all of the associated policies and procedures in place to you know, to really kind of improve our internal management, business management and financial management processes. I mean, obviously they'll still be very key in terms of liaising with members, and also kind of leading the work of the heritage and learning teams, and also really focusing on project management, but of major projects and programs. So we'd ideally like someone who's got that kind of real expertise and deep knowledge of project and program management. We don't think that we necessarily need someone who's an expert in nature conservation, you know, because we already have that expertise within the senior leadership team. So that is where we are, but I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
It's a very helpful update, Emily. Thank you. And I think just in terms of timing, the conversations that have been had up to this point have all been around, obviously, we know that there is enormous resource stretch already, preparing for that situation after Andrew's departure. I think obviously accepting that we've gone through the usual process. I think interviews start early February, don't they? So realistically, we'd be looking, what, 3 months after that in terms of an appointment, just to give members a feel for how long, because I think for them, I realise we're asking to endorse your approach here, which I know I and the other natural environment charity chairs are fully supportive of. I think the questions that might then come back are those around what might be dropped. Is that sort of BAU? Is there anything that's sort of more strategic, and will that have on knock on? And I think what we'd like to do is probably deal with that head on at the beginning, rather than you left with any sort of, well, why isn't this done, or where is that? And we're then sort of backfilling later on when Q1 in 26.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll follow up after this with you and keep you and other chairs fully involved with that.
Great. Ben?
Is it worth just also adding, Emily, I know we had a separate conversation, that there is a willingness and an interest from the sort of minus ones from the superintendents and ADs to get more involved in some of those central programs of work, which I think is really exciting from growing our teams as well.
Absolutely.
That's an excellent point. So yeah, we've had a great suggestion from Jacqueline Eggleston, actually, that some of the kind of priority work areas that Andrew's currently leading on could be offered up to staff who are currently operating at that kind of head of level, so just below the superintendent, as a development opportunity, and that could be rewarded with an honorarium. So we will be looking at those opportunities as well within the team.
Really
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Ben. William.
Yes, I was going to say I'm very glad to hear of the way this has moved on. I was very worried about what we were expecting, but there is clearly a shortage of pairs of hands to do the work at the moment. So can I just endorse everything that has been said, and certainly if we can as you say, use honorariums or the equivalent, there is extra work that needs to be done. If people can cover it, I would certainly support that. It's obviously one of those unfortunate matters of timing. We've also going to be a senior member of management down in the Heath. People may be aware Jonathan Mears is retiring, and we haven't at the moment got a replacement, so there's a hiatus there. So there is suddenly a shortage of experienced hands there as well. So it's going to be careful management, obviously, as to what is business as usual as opposed to what can be delayed. And I'm very much look forward to hearing more about that, but quite understand that that is a matter of detail that isn't really for now. But as I say, I'm very glad that the paper has moved on.
Yeah, and I think, William, that just underscores the point around expectation management and communication. Sorry, Emily, do you want?
I was just going to add, we're working very closely with HR. They do have someone who is focusing on helping or supporting high-level recruitment for high-level sort of management posts, and who is available to do things like headhunting. So rather than go out to agencies, we're actually going to take that approach. I'm going to be working as well, sort of with that person to point them towards relevant organisations and the kind of type of roles that they could, people they could approach. So I think that should be helpful. And what we're not going to do is offer any kind of senior level job to someone who's just not, we don't believe is suitable. It's a very high pressure, challenging environment, and I think we just need to get the right person. And if that means going out a couple of times, then I hope members are supportive of that. Thank you.
Very much so. There's a resounding nodding of heads around the table. Very good. Thank you again, Emily. Thank you, members. That takes us to item 9, which is the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, which has had a huge amount of time, column inches and spotlight over the last few months. What I found fascinating is the report sort of gives us the detail of what is actually happening as opposed to what we told might happen in the press. This is going to be presented by Philip.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to add anything to the body of the report, I think, but just to say that the bill limps on, even though I wrote this probably 2 months ago, and it says it's almost completed its parliamentary progress. It just shows you you should never trust parliamentarians, perhaps. But what happened at the beginning and end of last week was that the government made a couple of concessions. They really relate to the planning and transportation elements of this report, but just to say that there will be a little bit more control, at least at the beginning, over the way that members here of the Planning and Transportation Committee will get powers delegated to them from a national level. There's a little bit that the government conceded on that. And that means that probably in the spring of next year, we'll start to see consultations on those sorts of things. But really skipping to the subject matter that's of most interest to this board, the government continues to insist, and even at the end of last week, really was strongly opposed by many Lib Dem MPs and a couple of Conservatives worried about natural England essentially being the judge, jury and executioner in relation to the whole process of EDPs, really. The government has put a little bit more control around that. There will be a consultation. There has been a little bit more about the things that EDPs will contain. So, for example, nutrient neutrality, chalk streams will be recognised in planning policy, things like that. Quite important. I'm not minimising those by brushing over them quickly. And then perhaps the final thing I would say is what the government has not given way on is lots of pressure to try and ensure that brownfield sites were the most were at the top of the tree in relation to those sites that might be developed, and they have not added any weight to that decision-making process. So everything is a sort of a flat category in that regard. The other thing I thought might be interesting to say actually is that Natural England can delegate its functions. We don't know how it can do that yet because the statutory instruments haven't been produced, but something perhaps for officers to think about in terms of how those delegations might eventually work downwards from Natural England.
Thank you, Philip. You've answered, that was going to be my question around the new setup and what that means in terms of it coming down the chain for us, in effect, to have the powers and then a sort of reporting obligation. Is it a fair question? Do you, I realise obviously it's limping is probably the word to use. I mean, are you at the point now where you don't foresee any major changes to these or responses, and that is pretty much where we're going to see this land? Or do you still have, yes?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Right. Ben.
Chair, just a couple of questions. Just on the delegation from Natural England, it was something we actually explored quite extensively with Natural England. They tried to change our classifications as an organisation because we look like the City of London Corporation, and therefore they thought we were sophisticated enough to manage our own SSI management and our planning responses. And actually, we said we're not. We're a local charity, and actually, it's really important that you continue to do your role because in the planning process, it gives us a huge defence. So I would suggest we need to be a little bit careful on that and on that delegation, because I think Natural England would be very keen to do a lot less work given the strains on their own budget and the backlog of issues they have. But could we also ask you just to sort of keep us updated, particularly in the devolution of local government that does impact a number of our open spaces and what that might mean? And also, interestingly, the announcement this week of the regional police forces potential, because what that might mean for the constabularies in each of the open spaces that have an impact there. I think that would be quite interesting. Thank you.
I'll certainly do both of those things. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Philip. No more questions or comments. That takes us to the City Gardens. Item 10, it is. And I'll just start this section by, on behalf of us all, paying tribute to Sarah Hudson, who has retired after a long stint as chair of Friends of the City Gardens. She was chair for almost 10 years. And I know we will all want to note her hard work and dedication, which has resulted in a number of improvement schemes, including Church Entry, the roof garden of Aldgate School, the wildflower meadow at Barber Surgeons, and the clean air garden in Moor Lane. Of course, she's delivered many walks and talks and many wildlife surveys. She set up the Tuesday and Sunday volunteer groups at Bunhill Fields and obtained funding and led on the rewilding project at Bunhill itself. Sarah's commitment and dedication will be sorely missed, and we would like to formally note our thanks for all of her hard work. Yeah. Thank you. Jake.
Thank you, Chair. So City Gardens update. There is currently 3 vacancies, 3 gardener vacancies within the team, and we are using temporary staff to fill those positions whilst we carry out recruitment for the permanent staff. Projects. St Andrew's Undershaft Churchyard has now been completed and is open. There's been a refurbishment of St Dunstan's in the east, so there's been a increase in the amount of pollinator plants and biodiversity, the biodiversity value of the site, and all the climbers have had their 10-year repruned. So the site is looking quite different at the moment, but it will bounce back next spring. Bow Churchyard, we've had some new seats with planters that have gone in the last week, and new in-ground planters will be installed in Q1 of next year. Tree planting, we're on course to plant 35 new trees this winter. Most of those are now in the ground, including 11 trees in King William Street that were planted last week. Tower Hill Playgrounds. Planning has finally been granted by Tower Hamlets. Contracts are currently being finalised, and we have a start date of mid-April, with the hard works being completed in mid-July when the play area will be opened. Some of the soft work, such as tree planting, will be completed next autumn. We don't want to be planting trees in the middle of summer. The accessibility audit, which we started, which I discussed at the last meeting, is now underway. Once complete, we'll be looking at developing an online accessible map so that visitors can plan their trips or city gardens before leaving their homes, as well as developing a suite of self-guided walks. Some responses to questions that were raised in the last committee. There was a request for a breakdown of trees shown in the tree reports that was presented at the last committee. There was a request asking for more details about those that were found to be not in good health. I've circulated an email to committee earlier in the week, but in summary, there are 27 trees in total. Of these, 5 have been removed already and either replanted or will be replanted soon. 3 of the trees, these are ones in the Barbican Speed lawn, have had replacement trees planted close by. The trees are in okay health, and we are leaving those trees in for another 2-3 years whilst the new ones establish. One of the trees has been removed and will not be replanted, as it was underneath the canopy of a nearby tree, so would be suppressed if we were to plant it. And the remaining 28 trees are being monitored and will be reassessed on a yearly basis. They do not pose any risk to public safety. There was a question raised by Heather Barrett-Mould, a matter relating about planning conditions to strengthen biodiversity controls for private trees. We are currently working with planning to review all conditions that relate to trees or landscapes. That consideration has been put down, so will be considered as part of that process, and I will update committee once this work has been completed as to how that requirement about biosecurity has been incorporated into planning conditions. Alderman Gregory Jones queried whether there could be a mechanism to report to NEB cases where planning action is taken regarding failing private trees. Again, this has been raised with planning, who are considering this, and a response will be provided to committee in due course. Ben Murphy asked about using statistics, about gathering statistics for visitor details in city garden sites, and there was discussion around whether we could use mobile phone tracking. I've been in contact with policy and performance analyst at the town clerks, and we are looking at utilising mobile phone connection data for both Finsbury Circus and Bun Hill. Initial discussions indicate that this might not be accurate, this type of data might not be accurate enough for our smaller sites, but we're going to trial it out with those 2 larger sites and assess its suitability for those smaller sites. And if that's not suitable, there are some other options that we can consider. And then there was a second question raised by Ben Murphy regarding Houndsditch and the representation of its history, in particular Sir Geoffrey Barkington. Policy and projects who led on this project have taken this request on board, and options are currently being developed. The Christmas tree was lit by the Lady Mayor on the 2nd of December, and there was the event, which was very well attended. And last Friday, myself and Joe Kingston attended the British Association for Landscape Industries, the National Awards, where Finsbury Circus was presented with an award for landscape construction of over 500,000. And it was awarded we were considered to be the principal winner, so the overall winner for regeneration schemes of over 500,000.
Absolutely brilliant.
So yes, our first national award, so very pleased with that.
Absolutely wonderful, very well deserved.
Happy to take any questions.
Ben.
Just one, and I know we've talked about this in terms of signage. I know I raised a specific point on signage around Bishopsgate Gardens, which I'm grateful that you're having a look at. But in terms of the process of reporting issues with signage, and then when we replace them, I mean, it's just such a good news story for local councillors. Is there a sort of way that, I guess what I'm asking is, part one is, do the existing gardens team report these things as they're going around just doing the garden, saying, look, this needs a bit of maintenance, or how does that get captured? And then the second part is, once we actually get the money, fix the signage, do we actually celebrate that?
Yes, we do report. So gardeners report all issues within gardens. It's actually, signage falls under city surveyors, and there is a replacement programme. We are working with city surveyors to look at the existing wooden signage and looking at replacing it with something more sustainable. And something that won't rot in 10 to 15 years time. We are also working with the churchyards because obviously a lot of those historic signs are in churchyards, so it needs to be something that is fitting with the churches. Do we celebrate? Probably we could do that better. And so yes, we can look at when we are putting new signage in how we can promote that.
And dare I say, given the conversation about advertising and sort of print signage across the city at the moment, maybe that we could have a reverse side of some bit of advertising and get them to pay for it. Just an idea.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. We will stay with you for item number 11, which is fees and charges. This is for decision. There is a recommendation for proposal B in the paper. Jake, do you want to give a summary of that proposal?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This annual report recommends increasing fees for events held in city gardens and event sponsorship by 4.3%, rounded up to the nearest £5. This is in line with the October 2025 RPI index. Charges for non-profit and charity events will be frozen, with all updated fees taking effect from the 1st of April 2026. Event income continues to support City Gardens maintenance and staffing, with 31 events generating just over £11,000 in 24-25. Photography booking remains steady. A focus on improving marketing in 2026 is planned to boost future bookings. Maintaining inflation-aligned increases is considered necessary to meet costs, and members are asked to approve the proposed 26-27 fees and charges. Happy to take any questions.
Tony, then Ben.
Do you charge for filming or product launches in the Square Mile, or it's just too small to do that kind of thing?
We do charge for filming. That's something which is negotiated through the central filming team. So we're not involved in setting those fees and charges. It's quite lucrative. I think this year we are bringing in about £35,000 through filming and product launches, but it's not something which this committee sets the charges at.
Thank you.
Sorry, you've lost me. I've completely forgotten. So we'll move on.
Does this include weddings in the city gardens as well? Because I know this has been raised before. The sort of what seemed to sometimes be the pop-up for photography sessions.
We do wedding photography. We don't currently have weddings that take place within city gardens.
Yeah, but everyone who's having their wedding photos taken there should technically have a license and be paying.
Absolutely, they should be. There is a process.
I think a lot of the sort of commentary we've had previously on this is around enforceability.
Yes.
And how much of that is at the large commercial level, and then what we do for those that are sort of the incidentals that I see fairly regularly. Do we have? I suppose we don't really have that's probably data we don't hold in terms of how they're enforced and where it's if we're approached, or other teams on the ground saying to people that come into those spaces, do you have a license? Yeah, exactly. Pin it to the dress. Take the bouquet.
we did, because St Dunstan's in the east is the main focus for this type of activity, and we did employ Park Guard to be on site for 2.5 months over the summer of 24. That was an aim to try and push down the unlicensed activities and try to increase those that were paying. It didn't actually increase the income we were generating, that we hope to generate from that. It did drive down the number of unlicensed events. What we do is we make sure that if someone does come through the proper process, is that we make sure there are gardeners on site, making sure there's not other activities taking place during their wedding shoot, and that they're given a preferential treatment. But it is very difficult to police and stop people from nipping into a garden and taking some wedding shots, which can have be done and finished in 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, quite. Yeah, Ben.
I remembered my question eventually. So on Finsbury Circus, my understanding is the grass is still being rested at the moment. Given I guess my question is, what is the impact next year for income generation if we are still having to sort of rest the grass for a longer period of time, given the complexity there?
The grass performed really well this summer, so we didn't, I'd have to go back and check, but we probably didn't open up the lawn until June, so quite late in the year. But that was to get the initial roots down to a good level to make sure the grass was really well wearing. We will always have to close the lawn at parts of the year to do restoration, to do top dressing and reseeding, but we choose those times at quieter times when it comes to events. So we're doing it now where there are no events planned. So we do look at when we can do it, and so it doesn't impact on particular events. But overall, I'm very happy with the way the lawn has worked in the first year. There will always be impacts on the lawn. It's something that we are keeping a very close eye on.
It may be a good idea, if we're going to close it for any period of time, to actually promote the roof gardens that lots of people still aren't aware of, because they're a huge asset, I think, in the city and growing rapidly.
Yeah, I'll take that away.
Very good. Members, are we content to approve option B? Yes, agreed. Thank you very much. That takes us to item 12, which is responsible dog ownership. Subject that we've seen in and out of several of our committee meetings. I think sort of important just to note here, I know there've been some questions previously just around the public space protection orders, and I think the sort of reference around how we use them. I think it's just important to note here that those are that is the nuclear option, and there needs to be clear evidence of a problem. So I think any sort of discussion around why we may use them in one City of London open space and not another, I think that should hopefully sort of sum up that point. We are being asked today to endorse the continuation of the current approach, which is entirely relationally based, and I think one that works on sort of sidling up to people as opposed to creating an environment of confrontation, but then also to agree that the introduction of PSPO should not be pursued at this time, but the situation should be kept under review with further reporting, as we've had already, should a serious issue emerge or that trend and pattern change to the point where we feel that the current approach is no longer suitable. Jake, anything to add on that?
It just sums up very well, Chair. Now, since the appointment of the City Gardens keeper in October of last year, Bunhill Fields has seen a marked and sustained improvement in responsible dog ownership. Issues and incidents leading to interventions have declined sharply, and there's been no recorded problems since June of this year. Dog fouling remains low and primarily occurs when the keeper is off site. Stakeholder feedback, particularly from Friends of City Gardens, highlights a calmer, safer atmosphere credited to the keeper's visible presence, educational approach and strong engagement with regular dog owners. The recommended approach is to continue the proactive relationship based at Bunhill Fields and to replicate it where needed, most notably at Smithfields Rotunda and St Bartholomew the Great. We will continue to monitor and return to committee if concerns re-emerge in the future.
Very good. I suppose thanks also to the City Gardens keeper and Snoopy. Caroline, and then Beth.
Yes, thank you. Just adding my thanks. I mean, it's made a huge difference, an amazing difference. Just one question about the soil in terms of going into next summer, particularly for the couple of primary schools that want to use that space. Is the soil quality improving and therefore the grass and that wider environment to allow school trips to pass their risk assessments?
Yeah, I mean, the schools can pass their risk assessments. We can't guarantee that there is going to ever be a dog feces free site unless we ban dogs completely, but I think that's the same as any public open space. And the risk assessments will take that into account. The keeper is very vigilant and we know which areas the schools will be going into, so we can do that preliminary walkthrough assessment before the schools turn up. We are doing a soil survey of the main lawn area in January, February of next year. And obviously that doesn't cover all of the areas of the garden, so we can't say it's completely free, but we will have an assessment of what the soil is like at that point. We didn't do a benchmarking, so we won't have anything to compare it to, but we will have an assessment of the soil and any pathogens in the soil.
Brilliant, thank you.
Great. Content to agree. We continue as is. Very good. Thank you. Town Clerk.
Thank you, Chair. Item 13 is any questions on matters relating to the work of the committee. I have not received any in advance. Seeing none. Item 14, any other business that the chairman considers urgent? Chair, do you have any?
Yes, I wanted to just, we will have an update from the Youth Natural Environment Board in due course, but I wanted to let the committee know that myself and the chair of the Education Board have written jointly to all of those schools in the family of schools to encourage participation and engagement. And I think, as we all know, there is this question around the governance, how young people are elected to the board, how it interacts with this board. So our next paper will effectively conclude that piece and then give an update on the response that we've had from the family of schools and how we intend to engage those young people. As you can imagine, the last thing we want, as we certainly the elected members here will testify to, a board with 35 or 40 members is quite unwieldy. So we're in discussion with Simon Lightman just to talk around how that sort of election process might work, how we get people involved with the board, but also in each of those individual school hubs. So really looking forward to seeing that come through. Caroline.
And just say a couple of things linked to that as well, that I think that this is to be expected in terms of going into second phase. So after setup, some of the alumni that have been working with them are obviously getting older, and they need to make sure that they have an appropriate feed come through and other leadership opportunities. Quite a lot of joint work going on with the Epping Forest District Youth Council as well. And watch out for them next year. They are playing a very big role with the Royal Commonwealth Society in the run up to the Commonwealth Games, and are the key deliverers for the Royal Commonwealth Society in the plastic oceans pickup campaign. So they're doing really, really well. But there are things now moving into second phase that they need to get in place, and obviously making sure the governance is right for handing on to the next leadership generation is important. But they've done a cracking job, and our thanks to Simon Lightman and Jacob Sprake particularly. I think we could register.
Very good. Thank you, Town Clerk. Oh, Ben, sorry.
Chairman, I was just going to ask a quick question. In terms of elections, you know, given how digitally enabled we are as a society now, it would be great if there was some voting option available via a digital platform, because your sort of engagement levels will be so much more significant, and it will give you a real mandate to explain how important this is to the family of schools. I would suggest perhaps a conversation with Zaki about what tools we have.
I will do that. Thank you, Ben. Town Clerk.
Thank you, Chair. Item 15 is exclusion of the public. Do members agree to exclude the public?
Agreed.
Thank you. Please vote over live stream and recording.